Hello, good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to our webinar, Getting the Best Out of Consultants, out of LCA consultants in particular. We're going to be exploring how LCA consultants will be working in the future, how the market and the demand is changing, and what we can learn from different trends that are occurring. We have with that Brad Kurzynowski, I hope I pronounced it correctly.
Got it.
Consultant at RRS, Resource Recycling Systems. And we have also Greg Norris, co-founder at Earthster, who's teaching also LCA in Harvard and MIT. And I suggest that we start with a bit of context from Brad.
Sure.
And why don't you give us a little bit of an intro on RRS and the LCA projects that you've been recently working on?
Yeah, that's great. Well, first off, thank you, Daniel, and the rest of the Earthster team for having me on today. As Daniel mentioned, I'm Brad Kurzynowski, a consultant with Resource Recycling Systems. We are a small consulting firm based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan in the U.S., but we have folks all over the continental U.S. and then a couple in Europe as well. We work on a lot of waste management and resource management type projects, but also have a corporate sustainability and kind of packaging practice area, and a growing life cycle assessment practice area as well. So we've been fortunate to work with Daniel, Greg, and the rest of the team at Earthster over the past, I guess, probably year and a half or so, using the Earthster tool and incorporating that into our projects, which has been extremely well received by our clients. In terms of projects, we're working on kind of a range of things right now. As I mentioned, we have a pretty well-established packaging practice area where we consult oftentimes on packaging at the end of its useful life and kind of waste management around that. But we have clients that are increasingly asking us for, a full life cycle perspective on the package along with that waste management, end of life management thing. So we've been working on a number of packaging related life cycle assessments along with some durable item, steel type item projects. And then we're also working with a few municipalities. We have a pretty large municipal practice area, and we are starting to utilize Earthster in support of some community goals. So like I said, sort of a breadth of projects, but again, very excited to be working with Earthster and utilizing the tool.
Thank you, Brad. And now let me open the floor because the topic today is how to get the best out of consultants. So let's start with that question.
Sure.
You both have had extensive experience in delivering value to others through LCA. So now, if you talk to those people, what would be the key things that you would tell people commissioning an LCA? What should they bear in mind to get the most out of their LCA and the work of their consultants?
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, from our end, like I said, this is sort of a growing area for us. And, each client that we work with sort of has different needs and different asks. But I think, for us, the way to best utilize us and I guess the way we're trying to best support our clients is to really kind of meet them where they're at in terms of the data that they have available. I think it really varies based off the organization or the community that we're working with. One of the really nice things, I guess, about using Earthster is, the access to the different databases that we can utilize within the tool, but, meeting them where they're at in terms of their data and, determining best ways to kind of utilize what they have and really deliver something that's of value.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. Data these days is one of the challenges. So try to find how much they have.
Yep.
Greg, what is your view on that topic?
Yeah, I just can't always resist. I feel like the most important question that I have to ask a client is, why are you doing this? Why do you want this LCA? Or if we just say, why are you doing this project? They say, well, we want an LCA. And you have to ask the follow-ups of why the LCA, is there, for example, a decision that you're trying to make? Is there an audience that you're trying to speak to? There's just so many reasons why you might want that LCA, and they're quite different, and they have such implication for how you actually carry it out. So I just would really stick with that why for a few rounds of why.
Yep.
That's probably number one. That has to be.
I think why is a clever question, regardless of the domain and the problem to solve. Starting with why is always a good idea.
Yeah, and you know how in LCA everything comes back to the goal and scope, and that's the why there too. So we really, you can, because you're building a model, your model's always simplified. You know, should you make sure to simplify or not simplify on a particular question or a particular issue, a modelable aspect of the system, that all hinges on the why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that said, I think, you know, Brad, you've seen a lot of cases where people start off with one question, and one motivation, but then once they get the model, in a way, that's when their what if questions really start to roll.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Greg, is, you know, working with companies that are kind of at various stages of understanding when it comes to the life cycle kind of process. The why can change sometimes. I think they can come in at times with one sort of idea of what they're, you know, expecting or what they want out of this. But as you go through kind of the data collection process into the modeling, and then I think, Greg, your point is exactly right, particularly once they're able to start seeing the models. And I think, you know, to take it back to Earthster, I think one of the really nice things we found is the ability to, you know, have the client engage throughout that process and see the models as they've developed. And, you know, like Greg said, I mean, it's once they see that, that's when the wheels just start spinning. They're like, all right, well, what about this? And what about this? Which, you know, the collaborative aspect of the tool, I think, goes a really long way in kind of, you know, generating new ideas and new thoughts.
And I guess it has to do, some people say that finding the answer to a question, 50% of finding the answer is figuring out what the question is. So by showing them the diagrams, by showing them the model as it unfolds, they can figure better questions and then guide it to the right question.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to follow up. We've been talking about why and how important it is to figure out why. What have been in your recent experience the most common whys? I might be pushing that word too far, but the most common reasons why people have embarked in an LCA, and how has that shaped the way they carried out the LCA?
Sure. Yeah, I think from so I guess, like I said, I think the why varies a lot. Certainly based off of kind of where various organizations are at in terms of their kind of sustainability journey, I guess you could put it. You know, oftentimes I'll use the example of, like I said, we work on a number of packaging related projects, and I think we can speak to that pretty well. For us, you know, with those types of projects, a lot of the why being asked right now, it kind of stems from material choice, and sort of, you know, carbon considerations and climate considerations around that. We're working with a pretty large beverage brand right now that's doing a lot of work and thinking about, you know, what does our packaging look like, both to kind of meet some goals that we've outlined, but also, you know, really digging into that full life cycle kind of perspective to make sure we're making the right material choices. And I think that's pretty consistent across a number of the projects. The packaging related projects that we're working on is those upstream questions that, you know, folks, I think, have potentially some sort of kind of preconceived ideas about, but they want good data to back up these decisions now. So yeah, I think that's a big one for us right now. Like I said, in the packaging space where we're doing a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can build on that, Brad. I've noticed, you know, as we've been engaged in helping you get the most out of Earthster in your projects, I've seen that quite a few of your recent clients have been coming to you with this idea that we think we have some environmental advantages in the market.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have this and that attribute of our product that we think makes it a good choice environmentally.
Yep.
And first, we want to find out if that's really true. You know, they don't seem to be eager to do the classical comparative assertion where they want to go blasting into the public space with a hardcore message that we're the green choice. it's more of a exploratory. We think we're green. We think we have a good option here, but we want to make sure that it's a sound argument, and we want to look for opportunities to significantly improve. Yeah. It seems like everybody is. I've experienced in the past where clients would say, "Just please help us use LCA to tell people we're green." And now it's much more, thankfully, sincerely, how can we become more and more green, environmentally preferable? Or just even how can we reduce our footprint? How can we make some significant changes? I really feel that there's that action orientation behind virtually all the projects.
Yeah,
I'm seeing.
Yep.
I also asked some people a couple of years ago, why do you see the uptick in LCA demand? What's driving that? And one of the answers that came back was, from many manufacturers, our customers require it of us now.
Yeah.
And so then I would ask why, of course. And they say in many cases, those big companies, those major brands, visible brands, have made a public commitment, such as a science-based target for climate reductions, or other public commitments, but they need the data from us now, their supplier. And they actually their jobs depend on hitting performance improvement targets. So our data is suddenly essential for them in doing those jobs and getting their bonus and so forth.
Yeah. Yep.
Nothing better than connecting something to a KPI to make sure that it happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And so what would you say that are the particularities, the different things that clients are asking for nowadays? Like what do they ask in the report? What do they ask in the way they commission the LCA that points out this emphasis towards bias that you were mentioning, Greg, or this want of discovering the model and discovering the question that Brad was mentioning?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Greg, I'll let you kick that one off.
Well, first, we've really seen a shift away from the kind of traditional or classical LCA where it was a report. Historically, that's what people wanted. They wanted the LCA literally meant a report with, sections in the report that were prescribed by ISO 14000 and so on. That really has changed because they want a what if capability more and more, even if they start with the report. Like we've said, the report generates so many ideas, and they want some pretty quick answers to those ideas. So much so that some of these people have been telling me, our consultant, and it wasn't RRS, our consultant says, we have to take that question and write it down and come back later because that was out of scope. And that's the problem with all you're giving somebody is a report. They want that relationship and interaction like Brad was talking about. They want to be in the meetings, looking at the model, and so on. It's so much, but at one point I thought, oh, maybe the report is dead. Maybe we can just sort of forget about reports. I don't see that being the case, though. I'm interested in your thoughts on this, Brad, but I think it's not an or, it's an and very much. They need the report because, back to that first example, they have to send their customer a credible, often peer-reviewed statement that this is our current footprint. These are our current environmental impacts. But then it's action, or I should say, and then it's action at that point.
Yeah. There's been a ton of interest. I think I agree, Greg. I know that anytime we deliver, provide a deliverable for an LCA project, we do provide a report, and I do think you're spot on that. Still needed, and like you said, that folks that clients are working with want to see that, but the level of interest there's been in utilizing models after we finished or having access to them. Greg, you've referred to it a few times in some of our communications with our clients as a living LCA, which I think is a really cool way to talk about it. And it really hits home where, you know, they're getting the static report, but also they have these models that are developed that, you know, as they get it, they, you know, bring in new data over the next year, something like that, can go in and update or invite their suppliers to come in and interact with, or, you know, maybe their production facilities to come in and interact with. And I think the value, it just provides so much more value than just a static report. And just, you know, I think it goes back to kind of the discussion of the what if scenarios too, where it's just like, you know, once they have their hands on those things, or, you know, once they kind of get a better sense of how those are set up, I mean, the wheels just start spinning, and it's like, well, we can think about this and this and this. And it's really, really easy for us to then go into Earthster, you know, make a copy of a model that we've put together, and then, you know, play around with some what if things. I mean, it's just like, it's like on demand. We can do it. We can do it in a meeting when we're on a call. So, you know, I think, yeah, there's just a huge amount of value in that. And I think, you know, it's certainly something that now that our clients have access to. They're going to want to continue doing, you know, having access to models like that moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see your customers making use of those models? So how does that contribute to them finding those actionable insights, right? That bias towards change, through the Earthster models.
Sure. Yeah, I think our clients, I think we and our clients are learning together how to best utilize the models once they're finished. This is a new tool for us. This is certainly a new tool for them. This is we've been using it for a while, but I think we're sort of learning together how to best utilize these, and it's very you know, business municipality specific. But I think you know, for us, there's definitely been a bit of hand holding up front, in kind of, you know, explaining, you know, how they're set up, and then, you know, what sort of levers are available for them to pull or switch or whatever you want to say. But I think the big thing, sort of like I alluded to earlier, is the ability to invite people within their organization or outside of the organization into the model and collaborate on that. I think there's been a number of packaging projects that there's been some real interest in that, and also a couple of our steel items we're working on. Again, just to, you know, make those models as kind of like up to date as possible. And keep them kind of updated in real time. There's been a ton of interest in that.
Mm-hmm. You know, Brad, I saw one of your clients commissioned an LCA, and then they wanted that what if tool as a follow-up, and they went off and used it for like a year. And the LCA gave the hint that recycled content, I think, was one of the issues that would really drive the footprint. And so that increasing recycled content would drive down the footprint to a significant extent. And they told us we were getting a lot of value out of that what if capability. We're using it heavily. And then they had an announcement recently that they have I think 100% recycled content or something real close.
That's right.
Product. So it seems that they're using it for product design. You know, they're using that LCA and the what if capability for environmental design and generating new product offerings.
They are, and I think seeing the value in that during that previous project. I mean, we're working with them on another project right now, and I mean that's something that, you know, that was one of their goals with the project, is to be able to, you know, again, identify those kind of key drivers and then have the ability to sort of play around with it a little bit to see, you know, how the impact can be minimized or I guess, we'll say minimized, but been of great use for them.
Mm-hmm.
That takes us to another very interesting topic. LCA has traditionally ran a very technical and scientific field, and it is a very scientific method. But because of the trend, green is becoming popular. Some say green is the new black. How do you see that field, like the people in the field, evolving? Will this become something for everybody? Will they have to learn all the little details of the LCA models? Will there be different levels of depth? How do you see users of LCA growing or changing in the upcoming years?
Greg, I've heard you talk about this a number of times, and I know this is something that you're excited about. So I'm gonna let you take this first, but I can jump in too.
All right. Thanks, Brad. I think it's easy to kind of picture a future where, everyone's going to become an LCA nerd. That's, the simple-minded thing. I don't see that. What I do see is, that that's not only the LCA nerds doing LCA. That's the broadening. You get so many more people in the organization, as you've said, Brad, who at least can get their hands on it. They probably are not going to. They're certainly not going to build the model, at least not this year. Maybe they'll get psyched and go there, in a subsequent year. But at least they do want to get their hands. They're drawn into it rather than repelled by it, or scared off. And there's so much business value that can be unlocked if they have the ability to get the insights, what matters, and test some assumptions or do some what ifs. But I think there's still very much a role for the scientific expert people, Brad, Daniel, that you mentioned. You have to. It really helps to either have someone on your team who's got that high depth of knowledge, or a consultant that you can go to. Brad's team will, for example, build these models for their clients, and the client will go off and happily use it. But they'll be calling Brad.
Yeah.
They'll call Brad to answer a detailed question, cross-check some assumptions. And when it's time to either expand the coverage of the models or tackle a new product category, they're generally going to come back to the consultant for that too. So I think if anything, that's kind of an interesting, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too, Brad. People thought, well, if we make this too easy, the client won't need us anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing any evidence of that. But
no, I don't think that's the case. And we've actually had a conversation about this recently with one of our clients, who really, of the clients we've been working with, is probably the heaviest user of the models within Earthster. But her question was kind of exactly that. I mean, it's like she's curious, like, is this a thing you think eventually that I can get to a point that I'll just be setting these up? Maybe not even need us anymore. And I think thinking about someone, she's high up in sustainability within the company, maybe has a couple staff. I don't think she necessarily has the time and maybe really the desire to go in and do kind of the technical work behind this modeling. But she is very interested in what the models are delivering. And she's very interested in interacting with the models once they're set up. So yeah, I think it's a little self-serving because I'm an LCA consultant. I think there's certainly still a place for us to help kind of in the early. And like I said, I mean, going back to what I was talking about kind of early on in this conversation, especially with clients who are just starting out on maybe their life cycle assessment journey, they need support. They need support in organizing their data. They need support in, I think, asking kind of the right questions and figuring out the whole goal and scope kind of aspects of the study. But having access to things that they can interact with, it's just so much easier for them to kind of get excited and then kind of remain excited about what they're getting from this and see the value in it. And then, hopefully then from there, think about, additional studies that they can work on, things like that. So, I think there's a place for both. I think, like I said, a little self-serving, but I think there is certainly a place for, the consultants that can bring in the technical expertise to, make sure the modeling is done in I guess the correct way, for lack of a better phrase. But, the Earthster tool is just, it just provides a level of access that we haven't been able to provide before, which I think just makes it, much, like Greg said, much easier to approach, whether it's somebody that's in sustainability or the company or someone in manufacturing. You can really bring in a lot of people and get them involved.
it almost sounds like you're describing a role that will not go anywhere, which is for the consultants to educate organizations. And there's always an edge to continue educating, be it
Yes.
new models,
Yep.
be it new domains, be it the new technology that they're developing that they
Yep.
don't have reliable models yet. So
Yep.
so there's always an extra edge that they need to learn, and the experts are there to hold them by the hand. Does that resonate with your experience? Do you see yourselves as educators when you're doing consulting?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's been one of the really nice things about working with the team at Earthster is there's times where we are asked to be the educator and we don't have the bandwidth for it. We got a number of projects we're working on. Our LCA team is growing, but it's not huge. So to be able to, access the Earthster team, contact Heine and say, hey, can you set up an hour with this client just to kind of walk them through, they have these questions, and then maybe I would be able to join for a bit. And, if there's some kind of model specific questions, but yes, I think a big part of our role is educator. Like I said, particularly for those clients that are just starting out and need, I think they come in with sort of a very high level understanding of what they might get from LCA, but just, don't have a great sense of what the process looks like.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep. I was talking to a vice president last week of an international firm that serves the aviation sector. And I was talking to her about consultants, and she said, we need the credibility to our results and so on. But what we really need is someone to help us. We need an in-house talent on this. So what we need is a consultant, not who comes in and keeps us dependent, but one who empowers us. Because we feel we have to have this continuous, we have to get good at this ourselves too, as much as possible.
Yeah. I'm thinking, that's just kind of from our perspective and the clients we work with. Cause it's a good point, Greg, sort of the in-house kind of expertise. Oftentimes the clients we're working with, their sustainability groups. This isn't always the case, but it, quite a few times it's like one or two people. And they just don't really have, the bandwidth to have somebody be their kind of in-house expert on this. And that's where, I think we really can step into the role as educator, and, help their sustainability staff kind of learn about this at a level where they can make sense of what we're providing them and work with it, but they don't have to, take Greg's course at Harvard or MIT to, be able to work with these things. It's just, right. It's kind of, I don't want to say a light touch, but, we can kind of be there for the quick questions as opposed to them having to do all the research themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing a question coming in from the audience that fits perfectly with the topic that we're talking about, educating the clients. Mm-hmm. And so Juan Mandi says, I think the biggest challenge is to decide what would be the most relevant impact, especially since ISO 14040 standards don't support the idea of normalizing all impacts into a single score. This is a whole, like the choice of impact categories and environmental impact is a whole area of educating clients. What would you answer to Juan?
Yeah, I'll get started here. I think he's got a great question, and he's correctly identifying that, first of all, the challenge for a given product or a given organization, identifying the high leverage, the most important, the most material environmental impact categories is key, is one of the main things we want to know. We want to know, of course, which life cycle stage contributes the most burdens, but we also want to know which environmental impact categories are the most material for this product or for our organization. And Juan is right that normalization, namely dividing the impacts of that product's life cycle by total impacts from all sources in a given region for a given year, that's normalization. And that's a wonderfully data-based way to answer that question. Juan, I would just say that ISO 14040 it is quite nervous about single scores, as you point out. In fact, you're prohibited from producing a single score in certain contexts, but you can have normalization results without a single score. And you can have those normalization insights about identifying high leverage impact categories without ever, creating a final single score. So I think I think it's a really important use.
So I'll just speak kind of from the perspective of what our clients are often asking for in terms of relevant impact categories. I think it's oftentimes the climate change impact. I think it's something that most businesses are interested in. From what I've heard and kind of seen, it seems like a thing that a lot of businesses are starting to set goals around, or the science-based targets like Greg was alluding to. And I think one of our kind of key roles is, helping them understand, like Greg said, sort of, what are the kind of what's most material, kind of what's the important things, looking outside of only just, maybe like the climate change category, and making sure they're just, educated on the other things and not solely focusing on kind of this one area.
Yeah, they do, Brad, don't they? They seem to say, we know we have to tackle climate change, period. Yeah. But can you tell us what else should we be paying attention to?
Yeah.
And that's where normalization can really help.
Absolutely.
It's almost as if the world would be playing a game of tug of war between wanting one number that rules every other one. And then, for example, we pick climate change because everybody's talking about climate change, and then wanting to really understand the complexity behind it. And and ISO not wanting you to add things to a number, because then you lose that richness that makes LCA at the end of the day.
Yeah.
He's also, and this is education, but from between two areas. So say another challenge is LCA analysts are not well versed in ESG reporting, and ESG experts are not well versed in LCA. Has that been your experience, both of you? That there's a divide between ESG reporting and life cycle assessment?
I don't know. It's a really good question. I think from the folks that we've worked with, they're, I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like I need to chew on that one a little bit more.
Yeah, I feel a little bit, and I don't want to sound like, I'm a guy with a hammer and so everything's a nail. But, Brad, one of your direct supervisors has said, I looked at the other traditional LCA software tools and my brain hurt. And then when she experienced Earthster, she said, hey, we have people on our team who can do this. Yeah. This is not chemical engineering, master's degree looking software. This is something that for example, our ESG people who are working on corporate social reporting or issues other than, engineering, maybe detailed product design, they can use this after all. And I think it is important to, I've also heard people say the LCA community has not been good at decomplexifying, at making this more accessible. Maybe that's a little bit, just a
maybe not yet.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We all love to be a guru. We all love to be the expert, but you got to let go of that and share, get back to empowerment. And I think with that, it breaks down some of these artificial boundaries that Juan is referring to, so that of course, ESG experts can feel comfortable with LCA. Yeah. And hopefully LCA people don't have their hands so full tackling LCA and being the only person doing it, so they can share, broaden their perspective. And, growing up as an LCA only person, I was always hungry to get to broaden myself and get into more things than just LCA. So I bet there's that hunger, and if we can get more people doing LCA and understanding it, then you're not stuck in the only LCA box either, and you can get more broad.
Yeah, you're totally right, Greg. Talking about Earthster specifically here, it's gone a super long way in our organization. We don't have, not everybody's an LCA practitioner, but it's much easier to give them access to our account, have them kind of explore and learn, ask questions when they need to of the Earthster team, and then be able to take that out into maybe not LCA specific projects. It also is really helpful for us in them going out to things like conferences and being able to speak to our capabilities, where I think with tools that we've used in the past, that wasn't always the case. It was a little bit harder for them to go out and get a question at a conference about oh, well, we're thinking about this, what could RRS do for us? And it's like, well, we use this, but I'm not really sure. But when they've been able to go in and kind of see the models as they're set up in Earthster from previous projects or some of the comparisons we've set up, it's been much easier for them to wrap their brain around and be able to, like I said, kind of speak to that when one of us on the LCA team isn't around. So yeah, breaking down that wall, I think that's a really good way to put it.
So maybe what we're doing is blurring the border of LCA people versus non-LCA people, or ESG people versus LCA people in a way that people can talk. People are people and can talk to each other.
Right.
Expanding the access to LCA, which I think we've been talking a lot about here. The Earthster tools, as it's gone a really long way for us in being able to do that.
I have another question related to the rise in demand, and maybe also related to adjacent fields. So some have said that the demand for LCA is poised to grow exponentially, to explode, because of the rising demand for Scope 3 data. But of course, Scope 3 data has a very strong climate focus typically, and then there's a demand because just having an organizational footprint and economically allocated gives for poor product data, so that they don't connect well. Do you agree with this, and have you experienced a rising interest in LCA for this type of scope? Scope 3, but I meant scope also in the sense of the type of project.
Yeah. So I was at a big packaging conference last week, and I think every single person that presented said life cycle assessment at least once. It's everywhere. I mean, this is, I've been to a couple conferences this year, but there is just so much, excitement about it. I think there's a bit of kind of going back to the educating piece, some educating that needs to be done around what exactly it is. And I think, people are kind of have different ideas about it, and they're talking about it in different ways. But from my perspective, I mean, the interest in life cycle assessment, and again, I'll speak to it from the packaging perspective. I mean, it's huge. Everybody's interested in it right now. We also have clients that we're working with right now that are thinking about those Scope 3 emissions specifically, and seeing, I guess, the models as we've been working on them within Earthster as a really good way to get a sense of kind of that product level supply chain information, which has been really, really useful. And kind of go back to the what if question, thinking about different levers that they could pull further up the supply chain that might, have an impact on that. So there's certainly interest from our clients in that type of data, both on, I guess I should say, both on kind of the brand and, corporate side, as well as the municipal side. We have a couple of municipal clients, that one specifically that recently went through a Scope 3, I think inventory or emission inventory is what it's called specifically, but thinking about, how can they utilize Earthster, take the learnings from that inventory, utilize Earthster to, ask some questions about, what different kind of policy interventions they can make or things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Daniel, I was also this VP that I mentioned from last week. She said that her immediate need is highly credible climate reporting, but she said, and I want an LCA solution as my way that I develop that. She had already decided. She said, we have a carbon accounting tool, we have a carbon footprinting tool, but that's not what we should be using going forward. We need to get the rigor, the databases, and the comprehensiveness on impact categories that LCA provides. She felt like it was an evolution. She seemed happy to have started with climate reporting, but she said it was kind of like it's time for us to grow up, and to evolve, and that's where we're going. And of course, you have science-based targets for climate now, but you have the development of science-based targets for nature. You have biodiversity indicators coming on strong, and of course water as well. And things are not getting more narrow. They're really climate's leading, but it's a multi-attribute. Environmental is a multi-attribute problem. Sustainability, of course, is.
It's leading, but there's more people in that race,
Mm-hmm.
or more impact in that race to be addressed.
Yeah,
right.
Excellent. Being conscious of the time, I have one last question that I would like us to briefly address, and that's we're talking about how to get the best out of consultants. So I want to end with a message. Like, if you could have one sentence, one message to send out to those looking to hire a consultant to do an LCA for them. What would you advise them to look at? What should they be asking and what should they be avoiding? What's the recommendation, the summary for them?
Sure. What should they be asking?
Daniel, are you saying what should the client ask?
A client. So for clients out there that are going to commission LCA, what should they be asking themselves or their consultants?
Mm-hmm.
You want to go, Greg? You want me to start?
I'll just let you have the last word, Brad. So I'll start by saying I'm going to come back to that key of empowerment. I think the days of just get in, give us a white lab coat analysis and let us put it on the shelf so we're ready if anyone asks. That's not it. I think this VP saying we need an internal capability is key. So I think if I were interviewing a consultant, I would say, of course, I need to know that you're capable. I need to know that you can help us solve our immediate problem. But will you empower us?
Mm-hmm.
How will you empower us? You'll empower us to do what? Yep. And of course, we need to know as a customer what we need as best we can. But I really want to find out if there's that sincere, that is part of my consultant's business model, that they are a coach and an empowerer, not just the savior.
Yeah. That's that's a really good. I think it's a good response to it, because I think that is a question that we are getting asked more often. Is that question? And I think it is. It's a good question to be asking. Is again, not just having this static handoff and then that's kind of the end of the engagement, but how can we continue to use what we're learning and, have that be kind of adapt as we grow and as we change and things like that. So yeah, I would agree with Greg. I think that's a really, really, really great kind of starting point.
Excellent. Then thank you very much, Brad. Thank you very much, Greg. And thank you to all our audience for the questions and for being a great audience. So for all of you who have been hearing about Earthster and aren't yet sure, I'm going to ask Heini to show to share my screen for a moment, so that while I say the next things, you're looking at it. So this is the type of models that you can be sharing with customers in a way that it makes them interactive for them. It makes them do those what if scenarios. And if you want to know more, if you want to try Earthster, you can try it. You can sign up and try Earthster for free. Go to earthster.org and sign up for an account. And if you want to follow us in our webinars, we have 2 of them coming up next week. So more than the usual. On March 21st, same time as now, 3 p.m. CET, we will have a webinar titled Teaching LCA in 2023. And on March 22nd, at 3 p.m. as well, CET, we will have an open training session where you can learn how to use Earthster and you can ask your questions. So they're very interactive sessions where we will have Greg and Heidi hosting the session. And you can find all about our webinars, all about Earthster in our LinkedIn or on earthster.org. And with that, I'd like to thank you again and wish you an excellent day. Thank you very much.